There is a particular kind of frustration that finds you every spring. You plan carefully, you buy seeds, you study the calendar, you wait for what feels like the right moment, and then by midsummer, half of what you planted is struggling or gone, and you are left wondering what went wrong. The timing, the weather, the soil, it all starts to feel like too many variables working against you at once. But here is something worth paying attention to. Amish gardeners do not wrestle with spring the way most of us do. They have been putting the same plants in the same ground, season after season, for more generations than most of us have been gardening at all. And they do it with a quiet, settled confidence that does not come from luck. It comes from knowing exactly what will not let them down. 7 of those plantings are on this list. In some you may already grow. But 2 of them, one that arrives around the middle of the list and one that closes it out entirely, might shift how you think about what a spring garden can be, the last one especially. Most modern gardeners have not touched it in years, and that is a loss worth correcting. Let's start at the very beginning of the season with the plant no productive spring garden goes without. The first planting is one that Amish gardeners trust above almost any other to open the season right: peas. An Amish gardener will tell you that peas go in the ground when most people are still waiting for spring to feel like spring, not when the soil is warm, not when the last frost is clearly behind you. When the ground can be worked at all, even if it's cold and muddy and gray, that is when the peas go in. They have known for generations what a soil thermometer now confirms. Peas are cold-loving plants. They germinate well in conditions that would stall most other seeds entirely. There is something almost meditative about a row of peas. They ask very little from you. A simple trellis, a stretch of netting, even a handful of branches pressed into the soil, and they will climb toward harvest while the rest of the garden is still barely awake. What most gardeners do not stop to appreciate is how much horizontal space a vertical row of peas actually saves. A 10-foot row along a fence can yield a generous amount of food, while leaving the bed beside it completely open for something else. Peas also improve the soil as they grow, quietly feeding nitrogen back into the earth in a steady, unhurried way. By the time you pull them in early summer, they have left the bed a little better than they found it. Plant peas early, plant them once, and let the cold do the rest. That is how the season begins. The second plant sits at the center of Amish spring gardening in a way that nothing else quite matches: potatoes. Not because they are glamorous, but because they are dependable in a way that few crops can claim. An Amish family that gardens does not wonder whether they will have potatoes. They plant enough, they plant them right, and the potatoes come. The method is simpler than most people expect. Save a few solid potatoes from the year before. Let them rest somewhere cool and dark until they begin to sprout. Then cut them so each piece carries at least 1 or 2 strong eyes. Let the cut sides dry for a day. This step alone prevents a surprising amount of rot. And plant them about 4 inches deep. Cover them. Walk away. Here is the detail most gardeners miss: hilling. As the plants push above the soil, you mound earth up around the stems, again and again through the season. Every time you hill a potato plant, you give it the chance to set more tubers along the newly buried stem. More stem underground means more potatoes in the ground. It is one of those small, consistent acts that separates a modest harvest from a genuinely impressive one. Potatoes do not need perfect soil or perfect weather. They need space, a little mounding, and time. An Amish family once described the potato as the plant that feeds you even when everything else fails. That is not an exaggeration. It is a simple truth earned across a great many seasons. Coming in at number 3 is a plant that surprises some people when they find it in this company, but it has been earning its place in kitchen gardens far longer than it has been fashionable: kale. An Amish gardener does not grow kale because it is trendy. They grow it because it does something almost nothing else does. It produces fresh greens from early spring all the way through hard frost, and in a mild winter it barely pauses at all. Kale is a bridge between seasons. Put it in the ground while the air is still cool, and it is ready to harvest before most of the garden is even planted. Let it grow through the heat of summer, and it just keeps going. And then, here's the part most people have not been told. Let the first hard frost touch the leaves and it actually improves. The cold signals the plant to convert its starches into sugars, and the flavor that comes out the other side is noticeably sweeter than anything harvested in August. A well-tended row of kale can feed a household for 8 or 9 months of the year. That kind of return on a single spring planting is difficult to argue with. In a productive garden, kale earns its ground twice over, and then it earns it again. The fourth planting on this list is one that Amish gardeners do almost instinctively, quickly, and without drama, because the results are as close to guaranteed as spring gardening gets: onions from sets. A set is simply a small, dried onion bulb, harvested young the season before. Press it into the soil an inch or two deep, give it a few inches of space, and it begins growing almost immediately. What makes sets so dependable is exactly that speed. You are not waiting for a seed to find its footing. You are putting something that has already begun its life into the ground and giving it room to finish. For a spring garden that needs to be productive without drama, that matters more than people realize. Onions grown from sets push through cold snaps without complaint, handle late frosts without flinching, and by early summer are ready to pull, cure, and store for the months ahead. A properly cured onion in a cool, dry place can keep a household in onions well into winter, one small detail most gardeners overlook. The smaller the set, the better the storage onion. Large sets have a tendency to bolt, sending energy into a flower stalk instead of the bulb. Choose the small ones when you buy them, and the harvest keeps far longer. Onions are not exciting, but a basket of them in January, harvested from your own ground, is one of the quietest forms of abundance there is. Take a moment here and think about your own garden this spring. Of the 4 plants you have heard so far, is there one that is missing from your plan? One that could fill a gap, extend your season, or simply give you something dependable when the rest feels uncertain? Keep that in mind as we go on. The 5th planting is the one that genuinely surprises most people the first time they encounter it in this context: comfrey. Most gardeners have either never heard of it or know it only vaguely, something old-fashioned, something that grew in a corner of a grandparent's yard without explanation. But in an Amish garden, comfrey is treated with quiet seriousness. It goes in once, and it stays. Comfrey is a perennial, which means you plant it in spring, and it returns every year on its own, deeper rooted, broader, and more productive with each passing season. Its roots reach remarkably far into the earth, drawing up minerals that shallow-rooted vegetables simply cannot access. When the large, coarse leaves are cut and laid on the surface of the soil nearby, and they break down quickly into one of the richest natural fertilizers a garden can produce. No processing, no compost bin, no waiting. Cut the leaves, lay them down, let them work. An Amish gardener plants comfrey at the edge of a garden, near fruit trees, or along the border of beds where heavy feeding plants grow. It is always working, even when it is not being harvested. The soil within reach of a comfrey plant is almost always measurably richer than the soil a few feet away. What most people do not know is this: once comfrey is truly established, it is nearly impossible to remove. Plant it where you intend for it to live, because that is where it will stay. One plant, One decision, and your garden feeds itself for decades. The sixth planting on this list is one that teaches patience and rewards impatience at exactly the same time. Radishes. Some varieties are ready to pull in as little as 3 weeks from seeding, and that speed makes them valuable in ways that go well beyond the radish itself. An Amish gardener uses radishes as a marker crop, and it is a practice worth understanding. Slow germinating seeds like carrots and parsnips can take 2 to 3 weeks to show any sign of life above the surface. In that time, weeds can establish a head start that is genuinely difficult to overcome. Sow a few radish seeds in the same row, and they sprout quickly, marking the line exactly, loosening the soil crust for what is growing beneath and showing you precisely where to weed and where not to. By the time you pull the radishes, the carrots are just finding their footing, and the row belongs to them. Radishes also have a second season worth remembering. Planted again in late summer, they offer a second harvest that is often sweeter than the spring crop, and they carry the bed productively all the way to the edge of first frost. 1 row, 2 seasons. That is the kind of efficiency a productive garden is built on. Here's something simple you can do this week. Go out to your garden and find a spot that is sitting empty, even a small one. A corner, a gap, a strip along a path. An Amish gardener would not leave that ground idle in spring, not even for a week. Take a pinch of radish seeds, press them lightly into the soil, water them once, and come back in 3 weeks. That single act, filling the empty ground while it is still early, is one of the most instinctive habits of a consistently productive garden. Idle soil in spring is one of the few things a careful gardener truly cannot afford. And now the 7th planting. The one most people do not expect to find on a list like this, and the one that, once you understand it, feels most like the heart of what this kind of gardening is actually about: horseradish. It is not fashionable. You will not find it in most modern gardening guides. But in Amish gardens, horseradish is treated with a steady, unspoken respect because it represents everything those gardens are built on. Planting for the long term. Horseradish is grown from root cuttings, small sections pressed into the ground at a slight angle in early spring. It asks almost nothing. The soil does not need to be rich. The conditions do not need to be ideal. It establishes quietly in its first year, produces its pungent, deeply flavored roots in the second, and returns on its own every spring after that without being asked. Year after year after year. What most gardeners have never been told is that the large, bold leaves of the horseradish plant act as a natural deterrent to certain pests, particularly the beetles that cause so much trouble for potato plants. Amish gardeners have planted horseradish near potatoes for generations, having noticed the connection through long observation. They did not need a study to confirm it. They simply watched what happened season after season and acted on what they saw. The root itself, grated fresh, is incomparable in flavor to anything sold in a jar. But more than the harvest, it is what horseradish represents: a plant put in once, tended simply, and producing faithfully for decades. That is the entire philosophy of this kind of gardening, distilled into one quietly remarkable plant. There is a way of thinking about gardening that most of us come to slowly, if we come to it at all. The idea that you are not planting for this season alone, that every choice, what to grow, where to put it, how you tend the soil around it, is an investment in what the garden will become across many years. Amish gardeners carry this understanding the way they carry most things, quietly, without announcement. They are not gardening for the harvest in front of them. They are gardening for the accumulation of harvests, for the soil that gets better each year, for the perennials that deepen their roots, for the knowledge that builds through repetition and careful attention. The plants on this list are not complicated. They do not require expensive inputs or elaborate technique. But planted with a little intention, tended with a little consistency, and returned to season after season, they form the kind of backbone that a genuinely productive garden is built on. The kind that feeds a family not just this summer, but reliably, for years. If one of these 7 plantings is new to you, that is enough for now. Try one this spring. Watch what it does. Notice how it behaves in your soil, in your particular light, through your particular weather. Come back to it next year knowing a little more than you did. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked. I would love to know which of these you are planning to try first. Leave it in the comments. Even just the name of the plant is enough. Thanks for spending some time in the garden with me today. I'll see you in the next one.